7 Dragons Continent, Shengong Palace. Someone shouted and called out to Yang Qingcheng, saying that she had kept him in slavery for 100 years. A girl with red hair and a beautiful figure was sitting on someone and moaning. Jian Han was neck chained to something. The woman who was sitting on him was the culprit of his soul splitting and going to another world. She was holding onto the chain that chained the guy's neck and sitting on top of him, saying that his pathetic body contained the soul of Hongdong, and he was just a pathetic lowlife. This girl was the first goddess of cultivation. Her name was Yang Qingcheng. She was the empress of Shengong Palace. The guy has been her sex slave for many years now. She looked at him and said that if he had originally given her his soul, she wouldn't have wasted her time on such a lowlife. She moaned loudly and said that with his help, today she would be able to ascend to a new level of cultivation, and only after that she would let him go. Han said that was nonsense and she would never let him go. He added that he didn't know that today she would just consume his soul. It would be better if she just killed him. She smiled and asked how he liked it. She got off him and lay down next to him and said that it was to make him submit to her, and apparently it wasn't enough and he needed to try again. Han asked again. He thought about the fact that if she did it again he wouldn't survive it. He needed to find any way to get out of here. Qingcheng kissed him. Han looked at her and said, looking at her figure and stunning looks, he was thinking, if she took off these shackles from him, then he would then be willing to willingly dedicate his soul to her so that she could reach the right level of cultivation. She moved closer to his face and aggressively told him to shut up. Qingcheng grabbed him by the throat and said that how dare he say such a thing to her, and added that she would destroy him. The guy wasn't particularly pleased that she grabbed him like that and asked that didn't she want to take his soul, and he had resisted for exactly 100 years, and now that he was willingly going for it, she didn't like it. The girl took her hand off his neck and thought about the fact that if she takes his soul by force then the chances of it obeying her are very small. But if he gives it to her willingly then she will have no problem with it, and she can discover 3 more secrets of the family and get 3 more lives. She needs his ancient soul. She looked at him and agreed. She said she would remove his shackles, but if he dared to touch her with his dirty hands or dared to escape she would kill him in literally seconds. The shackles broke off. The boy looked at her and touched his neck. He thought about how this vicious lady was too cruel. Han looked at her angrily and thought about how there was only one way out. The boy swung his arm. And then he swung his leg. And hit the girl really hard. But she just took it and shrunk to such a size that the guy just couldn't reach her. She looked at him surreptitiously and said, did he really want to cultivate in secret from her? He squatted in front of the shivering Qingcheng, covered by some small blanket near the balcony exit. He laughed and said that he had been Yang Qingcheng's slave for 100 years, and all this time he had really wanted to escape, and they were off to a good start. However, anyone who had been bullied for so long would sooner or later want to leave her. He added that he had been gathering his strength to do so for 100 years already. She started to move on the guy, and it was only then that he realized that he should have gotten out of here back when she was still standing there. The girl thought he wanted to kill her so he could culturize himself. She said she wouldn't allow it. Han thought about how delusional this was and how scared he was. Qingcheng grabbed his shoulder. She was back to her usual size and looked at the guy menacingly and said that if he wanted to escape, he wouldn't succeed, and the guy screamed. He looked at her and thought to himself that this was his last chance to escape and he had to do it no matter what. Han punched her and yelled, saying she was about to die. The guy jumped thus into some kind of portal. The girl sat on the floor and said that he cut off part of his soul to escape from her to another world. He was shouting to her from the portal that sooner or later he would still get that part of his soul back, and in the near future she would worship him for whole millennia as her lord. Her mouth was covered in blood. She was screaming that even if he escaped from her even to the ends of the earth, she would find him and kill him anyway. Tianwu Continent. Han was lying down, resting on the grass. But for some reason, he became suspicious. He looked at his hands and was very happy that he had escaped, and he wondered if he had a new body. He stood up, laughed and said that at last he had escaped from the claws of that evil Devulus, and someday he would return to this palace and destroy it. There was a girl standing behind him and she was surprised and asked if he was dead. She thought about the fact that she had given him a lethal dose of poison. Besides, even a small amount of poison could kill a person, and how could Jian Han even survive after such a thing? It turned out that the previous owner of this body was also called Jian Han, and he was in love with Lin Hu since childhood. But he did not stand out, and so she did not pay attention to him. The guy stood behind her with a flower in his hands, and she was apparently not very happy about it. But a month ago, the girl suddenly became kinder to Jian Han and even gave him useful advice, after encouraging him to steal the medicinal prescriptions. She sent him away as soon as he brought those prescriptions to her. The poor guy immediately died at the hands of his favorite woman. It's best not to go into the details of this very trivial love affair. Lin Hu said that since he wasn't dead, she would finish him off herself now. She looked at him with innocent eyes and said that no one must know about it or her reputation will be ruined. The girl added that if he really loves her, he should let her kill him. Han said that Lin Hu has no sense of shame at all. He said that if she kills him, she won't be able to save her reputation. Jian wondered how such a beautiful girl like her could have such a callous heart, and how good it was that this guy died without finding out. Some guy turned to Lin Hu and said that he had already said that it was easier to just kill him right away. He took her by the waist and said that she was too kind. He added that it was better to tell him directly that she would be his bride and then just kill him and let it be the last thing he knew before he died. Lin said that she was too soft-hearted and perhaps she should listen to him. They smiled at the same time and said they would kill him. But the guy decided to run away from them. They turned around and saw that there was no one there. Lin said to Jiang Han that he couldn't have gotten far and they better run after him now. Someone was coming. Jian Han ran as fast as he could. The guy ran to some tree. He was very short of breath. He leaned on the tree and said that luckily he had escaped while they were talking. He couldn't imagine how the dead Jian Han would feel now after hearing all this. Jian Han and Lin had already started running up to him. Jian shouted at him that he was pathetic and trash and he better not even try to escape from him. Jian turned around and was surprised. On the other side, a girl on a horse was swooping down. It was some lovely blonde-haired girl on a horse. She asked the guy lying on the grass what he was doing and asked if he wanted to die. He looked at her and thought how cute she was. Just then, those two people came running over. They looked at Yang Ryukshu and were very surprised. Yang Ryukshu looked at them and asked them what they were doing and if they knew that fighting was forbidden in the city. Zhang turned to the lady and told her that Jian was a traitor and that he had attacked them first and they had just caught him red-handed and were going to arrest him for stealing the recipes. Zhang thought about the rumors that Yang was really strict about policing the city were true. She looked at him and asked him again about the theft. Zhang said that everything is true and this person is Jian Han. He betrayed his family and stole valuable recipes for his own interest. Jian thought about how much of a lie this is. Yang looked at Jian, asked if it was really him and said that his family had already sent people and they would soon come for him to be punished severely. Jian stood with sword in hand and said that the guy is just a lying lowlife and he is not even able to take responsibility for his own deed. The guy started yelling and said that they were both insanely cruel and they knew that he was naive and in love with Lin Hu up to his ears, so they tricked him into stealing those valuable Jian family recipes. Jian Han arose in tears and said that when he had sacrificed everything to steal all those recipes for her. Back then, he had just caught the two of them in the forest, and it didn't matter if he was offended at all anymore, but his heart was literally shattered to pieces. The guy asked why she was doing this to him. Yang lowered her gaze, and the two of them simultaneously looked at her angrily and guiltily. Jian decided to say that they wanted to get rid of the witnesses at once, that's why they tried to kill him. Zhang swung his sword and shouted about Jian Han being a sneaky scoundrel who just wanted to set them up. Jian Han stood there sobbing stupidly as they continued to harass him. He shouted at them, "They don't respect the law." Jian Han was about to hit him with his sword, but Yang stopped him. She held onto the sword and said that she herself would personally lead him to the Jian family's house so that they could sort out their family problems themselves. The sword was right in front of Jian's face. The guy thought that Lung was a dumb pig and that she was clearly told that fighting was simply forbidden here, but he was still trying to kill him in front of Mrs. Yang. Zhang said that he heard that His Royal Highness wants Lady Yang and his elder brother to get married, and when that happens, he will become the prince's confidant, and after that he can serve in the royal palace. Zhang hopes that Lady Yang will not interfere in the matter regarding this Chien Han. Jian pointed his middle finger at him and said that he was talking nonsense, and he asked why he thought that His Highness would marry off such a beautiful girl like Yang to some lowly and unworthy person from the Zhang family. Jian thought that the Zhang family had no place in the palace. Henu got angry about this and told him he was a dead man. He told Lin that they should kill him. Miss Yang took her sword and flew up with this sword in her hand. Lin asked what the fuck this was and if she had a third level of cultivation. Lin was angry that they were around the same age, but she already has such strength. The girl thought about how she would never back down. Jian pointed his finger at Lin and told her to go to him and kill him, thus taunting her. Henna pulled Lin away from him and asked Yang how she managed to rise to the third level at such a young age, and asked if she was protecting Jian's family, and added that his family worked for the county government. Madam yelled for them to get out of here. Henna started to leave, but lastly he told Jian that he could run after Mrs. Yang all he wanted, and added that he was a pathetic mutt. The guy started talking about how his father wouldn't let him go so easily, and while he was enjoying his freedom, he and his father would catch him and he would pay for everything. He started apologizing to Mrs. Yang and said that soon they would be related and he would take care of Chien Han. Henna told Lin that they should go. Jian loudly told them that it was good riddance to them. Jian touched the sword. Lady Yang pointed that sword towards the guy and said that now he should follow her to the Jian family house, and if they really did him an injustice then she will help him to get justice. Jian thought about the fact that even if the Jian family found out that he was framed, he would still face some cruel punishment. Han took the sword off his shoulder a little and said that he had an idea and knew what to do to keep Yang from marrying that guy. She asked Han to tell her. City government residence. Someone slapped the table and asked if she wanted to marry someone there. A man was sitting and meditating, and there were two girls standing across from him. He said he disagreed, because not only can't he culturize, he also has a bad reputation. This guy is not worthy to be her husband. The girl standing next to Yang was her mom, and she said that marriage is a very important event in a girl's life and it's better for her not to make trouble for herself. Jian stood behind the wall and listened to this conversation. He didn't expect her to go to her parents right away. She went to her parents and they said that the county government sent an army to prepare for the matchmaking in advance, and in 3 days they will be in the city. At this moment, only they can influence this situation, and if they directly refuse him, their engagement is cancelled. And if they do it right now, the king will have time to send troops right now, so it must be done before the evening. Otherwise it will be too late. His father got angry and pointed at him and asked why him, that worthless piece of trash. The guy stood there and just smiled. And yet, what was that all about? Yang stood with her sword and asked about which one to marry him. Jin looked at her and asked her why she was turning him down, and replied by saying he was trash and had a bad reputation. Jin told him that the marriage idea is really good, but this city is full of other people. Why should she choose him? He replied that it was because she had to. He sat down on the grass and said that he was a stupid and insignificant piece of trash with a terrible reputation. Besides, a scum like him can't marry the daughter of the head of the city government. No one would ever think of such a thing. Han added that it would also be so shameful if he had already arrived with the army and found that his wife had been stolen by some scum in front of the entire city. He smiled and said that this way was perfect for the aristocrat to get away from her. He would make himself look like a laughingstock in front of everyone. Even the children would laugh. Miss Yang said that in such a case, the prince might just hate their city, and besides, he would never forgive her for such an act. Han folded his arms and said that the best way to get rid of fear was to start confronting it. Han added that she could be sure that as long as he didn't come with his army, he would find a way to deal with it. The boy thought about how courageous that sounded. Mrs. Yang reflected on the fact that now that she had finally decided to get rid of this marriage, she only had one option. Even though rumors of the engagement had already spread, and the girl thought about the fact that she still wanted to try the idea. She gave it a determined look. That was why she had told her parents that she wouldn't back down. Her father said that she was always stubborn and he wouldn't stand the fact that she would marry Jian Han because he was such a scum. Mrs. Yen rudely replied that he wouldn't be able to stop them. Her father said that the royal residence is very greedy, and if she doesn't marry the prince, they will annex the northern and southern lands of the kingdom. The girl didn't know what to do. It seems like she wants to keep her family's honor. Jian was upset. He thought he had found himself a beautiful wife, but this was definitely not what he expected from her. The girl's father took a deep breath and thought about the fact that this son-in-law might actually be able to temporarily save their city even if the king hated them for it, but they still had no reason to send military troops to them yet. Jian Han decided to go into their house. He was quite angry. He said that he finally got to see his dear father-in-law. Han said that he could be sure that the soldiers would do their job and his daughter would be safe with him because he could protect her from anyone. Han added that if anyone dared to hurt her, he would kill him. His father looked at him and said that if anyone ever hurt her, let her not blame him for being rude. The father went outside and his men bowed and all said in one voice that she was the chief of the town. The chief said loudly that there was to be an engagement tomorrow at the main palace of the city and they should all stand and guard his daughter. They again all agreed in one voice. Enjoying the hot springs, Jian Han began to concentrate his spiritual energy chi to obtain the 3 soul secrets. Han meditated. The ancient chaos soul Hongdun allowed him to learn the 7 secret techniques faster. The 3 soul secrets would help him improve his body and speed up his training. Something sparkled. There was an explosion of some sort. Han stood up from the water, surrendered his hand into a fist and said that the chi energy gathering process here was too slow. Nevertheless, the fact that a small mansion had a hot spring with such abundant dura was already quite rare. A girl came to the guy and covering herself with a towel to avoid looking at his naked body asked him to get dressed. She wasn't surprised that it took him so long to wash because the water here is very nice. Han asked what was the problem and couldn't she see that he was getting ready for the wedding. It was the maid. Her name is Xiang'er. The girl said that the guy better not lie, because he came here to occupy the special perfume pool and they had been preparing it all night for Miss Yang Ryukshu. She asked if he would hurry up, because the wedding is about to start very soon. Han was already getting dressed and said that he already needed some time to prepare. Xiang'er looked at him and said that even though the wedding ceremony started early, there are already a lot of honorable people and they will gather here to congratulate from, so there is no need to delay. Jian Han is afraid that it will be more than just congratulations and so he was curious how things would go down with this good show. Han thought about the fact that he needs to get stronger before Yang Qingcheng finds him. The 7 Dragon Continent is lower than the Azure Dragon Continent, so the concentration of aura here is much lower. Here, martial arts are divided into 7 levels: gathering chi, controlling vessel circulation, junior guru, great master, bullet master, sage and absolute peak. Each of these levels is divided into 9 classes, overcoming which one can reach the pinnacle of martial arts, breaking through this absolute peak and gaining immortality. Han remembered about Yang Qingcheng. She was already halfway to breaking through that very peak after all. The guy smiled, scratched the back of his head and said that there was a big gap between them. Han thought about the fact that the original owner of the body, or rather the fool who disgraced his family, was now a thing of the past, because the new Yang Han would take over the palace. The next day, the people at the ceremony were socializing, talking, eating. Someone asked why they decided to call everyone to the ceremony so suddenly. No one knew anything about it. Some guy turned to brother Lin and said that he had somehow come early, and he also said that his daughter Lin Huyu was just beautiful. The girl stood with Lin Chunyuan and kept talking to him. She thanked him for his praise. Henna said that in order to become Lin Huyu's fiancé you must be worthy of her man, and all the scoundrels will get what they deserve if they dare to approach her. Next to Henna stood Zhang Guozhu. The table that was prepared for the Jian family was empty. It seems they were afraid to show up today. After all, the scum on Jian Han was famous throughout the city. I think they would not dare to come after such a thing. Everyone was pondering over who her fiancé would be after all. Was it true that it would be the heir of the princely house? But no one knew. The city house would be afraid to avoid this marriage, for it would be unwise of them. Guozhu asked Chunyuan if Zhaoan would be her groom. He replied that it was quite possible because he and Yang Ryukshu had been friends for a long time and was going to stay in the city of the Yang family to become the leader and protector of the city. But Jian Han is too cruel and ruthless, plus with the support of the Zhang family, he could become quite a strong opponent for them. He is such a ruthless person that perhaps the Yan family will literally tame a real beast. Someone came and shouted for everyone to scram because they had taken his place. He would scatter everyone. Everyone turned around because they were wondering what was going on there. It was some angry guy who apparently really wanted to see Yang Ryukshu. He was very angry because he wanted to see someone who was better suited to be a son-in-law than him, Jian Han. The others were very surprised, for if Jian Han was here, they couldn't understand who the groom was then. And then stopped and turned around. His father came over and asked Jian Han if he was going to kill someone in his residence. Jian Han bowed and said that he wasn't and he just wanted to visit his uncle and aunt, though he didn't understand why Ryukshu decided to get married so suddenly. At first they looked at him in silence. Then they decided to tell him that she had met her lover, so it was entirely her decision, and his parents added that he and Ryukshu were probably not meant to be together. Probably just not meant to be together. Jian Han was surprised. The boy got very angry and asked his aunt about how she didn't know that he was going to stand up for their city. He vehemently said that in the whole city there would be no man who would be worthy of her heart more than him. Father waved his hand. While a furious Xiao An was telling her that he didn't believe it and asking her to show him in person who her beloved was, Father Ryukshu's soldiers were already closing in on him. He shouted that if they got in his way, he would force his way in. Yang Ryukshu walked into the hall. The girl looked simply irresistible. Everyone was delighted. She asked Jian Han to get out of here. After all, she really has a loved one and he should stop dreaming about their wedding, as it will not happen. He said that it can't be like that. Zhao continued to argue that she had been with him since she was a little girl and how could she even love someone else and not him. He still continued to believe that it was a joke at all and she was actually going to marry him. The girl replied to him that she was not joking or lying to him. She added that today was a day of great joy and if he stayed with them to celebrate she would be just insanely happy. But if he was against their marriage and he did not give them his blessing then she would have to ask him to come back. He shouted that she is his woman and by all means he will get her today. Ryukshu started to get angry too. She said that this was a great impudence and she gave a military order for him to go back to the barracks. Jian Han raised his hand. He said whoever dared to steal his woman is finished. Zhao was willing to stay here for his family and for Yan's sake, and now she is just marrying someone else. He asked if she thought he would obey her orders after this. The strength of the Zhao family was too big. Jian Han angrily said that today he would look at the one who stole his wife and he would have to immediately go out and fight him. Everyone was watching and seemed to start thinking that the family was deceiving them and if there really was a groom, he would have come out in public already. And here comes the groom. He came and asked who was yelling, because today was the happiest day of his life. He yawned and said that they were so loud that they had interrupted his sleep. He got a little tense and said that it might have a negative effect on their wedding night. Standing there were Han, Ryukshu, and surrounded by soldiers. Jian Han looked at Han very disdainfully and asked how this piece of shit was able to get attention. His father asked how he was let out and told him to go back. Everyone was surprised that this was really her fiancé. Ryukshu asked the guy to go back and not cause them too much trouble here. He replied that he just wanted to see the loudmouth dog. Han waved his hand and said that it didn't matter who he was now, because in an hour he would be the chief of this city and when he met him, he should remember to bow. And stepped with his foot and said that it looks like he was more worthy than him. Chien Han said that he had better get out of their family now. Jian Han swung around and said he would throw him out himself. Han looked at him and realized that he had 9th level Qi gathering. His father started to get worried because Chien Han came out to just take an embarrass from the family. His mother asked him to say something. Jian Han clenched his hand into a fist and was already swinging. But then Ryukshu managed to stop him with her sword. The girl stood in front of Han and said that from today he is her husband and they will be together until death, and if Jian Han wants to touch him, then first he will have to go through her. The guy was very surprised, said that since she was willing to bear her sword for him, he should kill him today. Han decided to step forward. Ryukshu tried to stop him, but she failed because the guy thinks he is a man and she just needs to believe in him. Jian Han thinks that since they have become a couple, he will protect her for the rest of her life and he won't let anyone hurt her in any way. Han said that if he loves her so much then he should make a gambling bet with him. Han didn't understand what he was even talking about. Han offered 3 options to gamble. The first option was to gamble on money, the second was on their dignity, and the third was just on their lives. Jian once again didn't understand what he meant by dignity. Han smiled and said that if he loses, he would lose his little buddy and bring him back to the palace. The guy asked if he was scared. He told him to just pick what they would gamble on. They stood across from each other and said okay, he'll take it, but he just wants to consult with him more on archery, fighting formations and strength. And Han replied that it's okay, and since he made the bet he can choose what he'll compete with him in. People whispered and said the guy has no shame at all. Henna said that Jian Han had been in the military camp for over 10 years, so he was fluent in weapons. Lin Huyu was glad that they would get rid of this trash soon, otherwise she would have hit her face in the mud. Jian picked up some kind of sack. He set the sack down and said that it was about time for them to start and he bet 10,000 gold on the first games, and asked if he had anything to bet in return. Han smilingly said that it cost him a lot to marry a girl like her so he didn't have any money with him. Ryukshu's father got angry and said that he hadn't spent a penny. Jian Han picked up 7 third-grade gold pills and said that each of them was worth 10,000 gold and that was all he was going to bet and asked if his bet wasn't too small for his bet. His father was shocked, but he was not really happy about such a bet. After all, even the city chief doesn't have that many pills. He shouted at him that he was a family waster and forbid him from betting with him. Jian thought that with these golden immortality pills, one could reach the pinnacle of cultivation, but 70,000 gold is an impressive amount. Such money could pay the annual fee of the entire city. Everyone looked at him and wondered, but no one understood if he really had such a thing or if he was just cheating. Han smiled and said that anyone could participate and bid. It seemed like someone in the crowd wanted to get these pearls. The guy asked why this waste of time. After all, he was such a lowlife. Ryukshu's father yelled that he needed it and her mother said he was crazy. He thought about the fact that this son-in-law is not as good as this immortality pill. All the families were very actively betting 20,000 gold each on Jian's victory. Lin Huyu whispered something to Lin Chenyuan. Jian Han said that they knew how good he was in battles. Han held the pearl in his hands and asked who else was willing to add 10,000. Jian was short of them. Who would be the first? Zhang Henner raised his hand and said that their family is betting another 10,000. He was turned around by Guozhu, took him by the sweater and furiously asked what he was doing. After all, their family's reserves are only 30 gold. The guy asked his father not to worry because knowing Jian and knowing what a loser Jian Han is, one can understand that if they put some more, everything will be fine. And Han asked what they were muttering about. After all, people are waiting. Guozhu raised his hand with a bit of grief and said that their family was betting 30,000 gold pieces. Han smiled and said that he was very generous. Also, the guy thought that finally the big fish had bitten the hook. Han went to his father-in-law and said that in that case he asked to be a witness. He agreed and asked him to leave now because he didn't want to see him now. Even though he agreed, he kept thinking that he had given 7 golden immortality pills for literally nothing. Trial Arena. Jian Han and Jian stood opposite each other. Only behind Han was a crowd of people who had come to the wedding and behind him was a crowd of soldiers. Han smiled and waved at him. And Jian looked at him with a menacing look. He turned around, smiled, and said that whoever captured Jian Han first would get a good reward. In front of the guys standing across from each other, their troops stood in front of each other and they announced the rules of the battle. The rules were very simple. Both sides needed to line up and start fighting to win. Everyone started shouting, "Go for it," many times. There was something wrong with Han's troops and he realized it. They didn't really look like normal troops. Someone shouted that Master Zhao and had never lost before. Yang Ryukshu was sitting next to her father and she too noticed something wrong. She asked her father what was wrong with the Han troops and her father said that he hired them on purpose because he didn't want to be embarrassed in the eyes of other people because of this lowly scum. Ryukshu became worried. Lin Chenyuan turned to Guozhu and asked if he wanted 3 golden immortality pills to make their family the strongest in the entire Snow City. He replied that actually his family also bet 20,000 gold and a marriage between their family members and the Yang family would cover all their conflicts. Ryukshu's father sat on the bleachers and shouted to the guy that he had better give the pills to his enemy in a good way and just don't make any unnecessary attempts, because he wouldn't succeed anyway. Han smiled and thought that his father-in-law's gaze was just as enthusiastic and let them not worry but just wait and they would be shaken soon. Father raised his hand and announced the start of the contest. All the troops lined up and shouted that they would kill him. Everyone was surprised to see that they lined up in a long chain in the shape of a snake. This is an extremely tough position to attack because it allows you to kill the enemy in a matter of minutes without leaving a piece of his armor on him. Henna stood with his father and told him not to worry because Jian would definitely win, and if not, he would name his son after Chien Han. Goju asked him if he would name his grandson after him. Henna blinked and said yes, but it was still impossible. Henna just offered to wait and see how the piece of shit starts crying. But it looked like Jian Han wasn't going to cry. As soon as An's troops approached them, he told his own to get their shields out. They all stood with their shields around Jian Han. Zhang Henna laughed and said that he told them that Jian Han was a dead man. It's not like he could just stand turtle defense against a snake. Zhao An's troops continued to pound on Han's defense, but this defense was still better than nothing. Father was very calm. He told Ryukshu to forget about it and not to look at him. The girl replied that it was completely wrong. Zhao An said that he wanted to see how long the guy could last in this position. He told his troops to pierce his defense. They keep hitting his defense, but they still can't break through it. An didn't understand how this was possible. Ryukshu said that is it really that one of the 10 long-lost battle techniques? It's called the Great Tortoise. Looks like this guy wasn't that simple. Jian Han had a spare trump card up his sleeve. Han stood between the defenses and smiled. And it seems Hanu wasn't so calm anymore. He told his father not to worry so much. After all, it was impossible that someone like him would know one of the 10 techniques and Zhaoan would break their defenses. Zhaoan shouted that one more strike and they would no longer be able to defend themselves. An's troops ran at them again with another strike. Han opened up and Zhaoan rejoiced. But they abruptly changed formation and once again the defense was not penetrated. It looks like Han is trying to form a long snake as well. Yen Ryukshu said that it was an imperial dragon strut. They all surrounded Zhao An along with his troops. It was also one of the forgotten methods of 10 strikes and it is known for offensive mobility. The spear was at Zhao An's face and Han asked how tiny Zhao An was with this move. He thought of something that keeps him alive and it seems he didn't reread the entire collection of books in the Yang Qingcheng temple while he was in her confinement for a reason. Jian Han won the first game, and all the family's mouths dropped open in shock. Everyone regretted betting so much, because they could have used it to provide medicine for a whole year. Jian Han picked up a bag of 30,000 gold and said that it looked like luck was on his side today. Henna started to say that he must have cheated, because a scum like him couldn't win. Hennu's father slapped him and said that if it wasn't for him, they could have lost 10,000 less. Guozhu stared at Ryukshu's father and said so be it. They will pay his family 30,000 gold and their family has a really good son-in-law. The latter asked why he was staring at him like that. Zhaoan started stomping on his troops and saying what useless lowlifes they were. Zhaoan asked for the next game because he wanted the guy to die. Jian Han held his prize in his hands and said that although they had rushed the wedding a bit, but they had won a lot of money and also discovered one of the long-forgotten battle tactics. He thought it was a great gift for their baby. Ryukshu's father took the prize and said that it was very good and agreed with his opinion about the battle strategy. Ryukshu looked at him and wondered if he had managed to find a new copy of the ancient books. The girl smiled at him. And they realized that this boy was not as easy as he seemed. She thought that he knew in advance that he would have to fight Zhaoan and so he decided to prepare in advance. Lin Huyu looked at him and realized that she had really underestimated him, for he had gone too far. Zhaoan approached Han and angrily said that they still had 2 more matches left. The latter replied to him to take his time like that. He looked at his future mother-in-law and said he wanted to ask her something. He asked that since Jian Han is her nephew, how does she feel about continuing the fight, because if they continue the fight he is afraid that he won't be able to leave the house today. Everyone is surprised at his confidence because he seems to think he can beat Jian Han once again. Ryukshu's mom replied that they should decide for themselves if they will continue the fight and they don't need to worry about her, and Han replied that he understood. He took his chin and thought that he was afraid if he continued to have to deal with Jian Han, his mother-in-law might get upset, and he also thought that the relationship between the Zhao and Yang family was not as good and simple as it seemed. Jian Han took the sword in his hand and said that he had had enough of talking and it was time for them to start competing. He said that he would paint it so that his mother wouldn't recognize it. He was holding a 10-stone bow. Someone in the crowd said that they usually used a level 9 bow. This was the ultimate level, and to get a more powerful bow, it had to be custom made, and this bow weighed 300 pounds. Apparently Jian Han had very strong arms. Zhang Heng covered his hand and said that this time he would definitely lose, because with his strength, he had no chance of winning, and besides, Jian Han's archery skills had always been famous throughout the Snow City and he could not be compared to Chien Han. Ryukshu didn't understand why he agreed to do this. Jian Han said that she would soon be burning with shame. Chien Han sat on the bench and didn't listen to him. Jian Han asked to bring the stone slab. His troops were already carrying it. They launched it upwards, undrew the arrow, and launched it upwards. The stone slab shattered in pieces. He hit right in the center. Then he turned to Han and asked what about him. Jian Han was indeed able to hit a moving target. Everyone was surprised how he was able to shatter a stone slab with a single arrow. After all, it was extremely rare. Jian Han laughed and said that he could call him an archery master because he could shoot such a shot that he would get pregnant from his shot. Ryukshu's father was in an inexpressible shock. Ryukshu laughed a little. Jian Han threw him a bow and told the guy to stop talking nonsense, and if he didn't do it now, he would finish him off immediately. Han caught the sword. Someone in the crowd laughed and told him not to hurt himself there as he pulled the string. Han looked at the bow and started to say, the base was made of bloody rhino horn and the bowstring was made of its sinew. This bow is really good. Jian Han asked him what he was looking at and told him to try to take a shot. He laughed that maybe he was afraid of dropping it and breaking something. Zhang Heng added that he should be afraid of getting his teeth knocked out. Chien Han said he didn't use it because he was afraid of breaking it and he didn't want him to ask him for money to fix it. Jian Han replied that it was all nonsense and would he even be able to break his 10-stone bow. He said that if he could do it he would pay him and kneel before him. Henna said that in that case he would also kneel and call him grandfather. Han drew the arrow. There was some kind of cracking sound. The bow broke stupidly in half. The guy said that now they should kneel before him together. Han told Ryukshu that they weren't married yet and they already had 2 grandchildren, and the girl replied that she didn't want grandchildren. Han and started saying that the man was cheating and he must have done his own shenanigans, and with his real powers he could never have done that. He answered them that he knew they could not admit their defeat, so now grandpa will open the eyes of his grandchildren. He asked them to bring him a bow of 15 stones. Everyone was very surprised and thought he was crazy because a bow of 15 stones weighs 450 feet. Ryukshu's father said that this bow was made of a solid stone, lapis lazuli, and its bowstring was made of the tendon of the Snake King. This bow is a treasure from the palace of the city lord and no one has gotten it for many years. Lin Chunyuan asked Huyu if Jian Han could shoot such a bow, and the girl said she didn't know because she had never heard of his skill in archery, but even if he could shoot it, it was unlikely to hit the target. Jian Han only took 3 arrows, and everyone was very surprised, because the more arrows the better. The guy started aiming. He stood to one side, and then the other. And then he fired. He hit all 3 arrows. People couldn't believe it. Ryukshu's father was very surprised, because even though the target was scattered in different directions he still managed to hit it. The way he handled the arrows was truly exquisite archery skill. This was their second competition, in which Jian Han had also won. No one understood why Jian Han had lost again. Jian Han said that it was just impossible. He walked up to the target that Jian Han was shooting at. All the people started to get disappointed in him, and thought about how he can't lose so easily because his cousin only belongs to him. He believes that she should be only his. Jian Han drew the arrow and told his grandchildren that it was time for them to give him the prize for the match. Han launched the drawn arrow at Jian. It hit him in the groin. Han retrieved the arrow. He asked how Jian Han even dared to do that. He started running at him and said that since he was looking for death, he would help him find it and he would make him pay him 10 times as much and torture him to death. Han looked at him and said that's how it is. Jian Han had a 2nd level and then had a 10th level. The 2nd level fought against the 10th level. No one understood how the 2nd level could oppose the 10th level. This time Jian Han would definitely be killed. Ryukshu asked him to retreat. Jian said that he would kill him today and make her his woman. Han punched Jian in the face. He hit him so hard that he fell down. And said that Han didn't have the 2nd level. He had 6th level chi refining. He had been deceiving him all this time. Han was very angry. He said that Han would die today. Jian Han punched him in the stomach. Jian literally flew up on top of him. Han punched him in the face. Jian was already bleeding. Han wanted to kick him, but he missed. No, he kicked him from above. That seemed to be the end for him. All the people were shocked. He instantly knocked him down. Jian was already lying on the ground covered in blood. And was lying on the ground and coughing. He kept on mashing that such a thing was impossible. Hannah shouted that even if Jian Han had level 6, he wouldn't be able to defeat level 9. Huoju slapped him again and said that there was no way he could calm down and asked how he could dare to trick him. He took the battered son by his clothes and said that Han was probably up to something again. Han asked what so he didn't understand. He walked up to Han and stepped on his face with his foot. The guy threw off his cloak and asked if he understood now. His back was covered in tattoos. Hanu looked at him with his mouth open. He said about the cut vessels. This method could instantly increase the power in the body by dozens of times, but along with the vessels, the internal meridians would also be destroyed. After that, the next cultivation would be many times harder for him and it could lead to death. Hannah laughed and told his father that how can he see Han is really a loser because he broke his meridians, which means that he can't advance beyond the 6th level. His father thought that this guy is really not as easy as he seems because he thought he was just a normal teenager and they have nothing to worry about. Ryukshu looked at him and thought why he used such an extreme method. Han said that now he was finished and asked not to do that. But Jian Han felt that he should now go to heaven and kicked him in the face with his foot. Death came instantly. Han's foot stood on the chest of the dead Jian. People watched and were surprised that he actually dared to kill Jian. Jian Han remembered about their wedding. He approached Ryukshu, smiled and asked if they could continue. She confidently said yes. Lin Huyu thought about how Han was hiding so much from her, but luckily he had cut the vessels, so he didn't have long to live. But she thinks he is still not worthy of her, and Yang Ryukshu is no match for her. Hanyu and Ryukshu said to bow. They bowed to each other and now they can go to the newly elected room. This entire room was filled with wedding candles. It was just the perfect setting for the first wedding night. Han ran his hands over the girl's cape. She said that she was very surprised by it today. She said that it turned out that he wasn't a loser at all but a very smart and brave man. She asked why he was hiding all this from her. He embarrassedly said that he wasn't hiding anything, and the guy was already very eager to get to the point. The girl stood very close to him. She asked why he killed Jian. After all, his family wouldn't just leave him alone and besides, he had cut his blood vessels. He grabbed her and kissed her. They hugged and he said that there were a lot of people at today's wedding and if he hadn't broken the meridians, he wouldn't have been able to handle the families. He said they could have taken strict measures in defense. But he hid his strength to protect the Yang family and in the near future he is going to take over the palace. He said that the Yang family is in the minority. He said that's why he broke his meridians. In their eyes he was just a loser, but now they saw his other abilities. Yang Ryukshu didn't think he would do such a thing for her family, but this sacrifice was too great. She took his hand and thanked him. He said that he was her husband now after all. Jian Han was already waiting. She held his hand and started talking. Since they became a couple, He will be her husband forever and she will protect him every day while he is in their residence. The guy said her name and thought about how he better not say it then, that he did it to make himself stronger. She looked at his hand and abruptly let go and turned away. Ryuchu said he had to stay with them for 1 year, but if he wanted he could stay with them further, but if he decided to leave, she would tell his father to give him a large sum of money and then he would be free. Han moved closer to her and told her that she better not think about it now and they would talk about it another time. He took off her cape and threw it on the bed. She was very embarrassed. He started to take the cape off today and said that they had managed to get tens of thousands of gold for this day and now it was their first wedding night, so all important conversations were better postponed for tomorrow. Jian Han reached for her with a kiss. But she immediately dodged and the guy kissed the bed. He couldn't understand why everything was going wrong in this room. The girl sat down next to him and started apologizing, saying that she wanted to be an honorable husband and wife with him from the beginning. She asked the guy to let her accept him as her husband, but without all this because she really can't do it now. The guy was a bit angry about such a bummer. He said she wanted to leave him alone on their wedding night. That's so cruel. He asked if she even had a heart. She said she didn't, but their maid Xiang'er would stay with him tonight. The guy smiled and agreed. He thought about the fact that he only had 1 year to live here anyway. Xiang'er came over. She looked in and asked what she could help them with. Ryuchu got out of bed and asked the maid if she wanted to stay with her son-in-law today. The girl was almost out and Xiang'er said very surprised that would she really be a prostitute and Han just smiled. Jian Han told to take off the girl's clothes. Ryuchu was leaving and talked about how one was no better than the other. Xiang'er was not eager to take off her clothes. She cried and asked him not to misunderstand her, but she didn't know what to say. Han with a satisfied face told her that she didn't need to say anything to him. The girl begged him not to do anything to her, but he didn't listen to her and continued to take off her clothes. Xiang'er thought about the fact that it was her body, thinking that it looked like he wanted to take her by force. He started to run his hand down her back and asked her not to make so much noise. He wasn't going to touch her. Jian Han's touch was very pleasant to the girl. He stopped and said he was ready. The girl wondered why so quickly. He sat next to her and said that you can't throw around phrases like that. Jian Han said that he had just checked the physical condition of her body, as it was written in this book that he was giving her now along with the immortality pill. He said that this pill would help her speed up her cultivation 10 times. The guy also said that if she didn't eat the pill, he would eat it himself. He said that she should eat it now. Jian Han didn't expect to meet such a purine body and for it to be worthy of good development. He felt that she shouldn't lose her virginity now. It would be too wasteful. Jian Han walked stretching and saying how tired he was. He had been practicing all night. Xiang'er said he had tried his best. Ryuchu looked at Han with a not very satisfied face and asked Xiang'er to serve her tea. She turned her back and walked away. Jian Han asked her to wait and thought about how awful it was when girls get jealous. It was a warm and sunny day outside. They were on a beautiful bridge, near an old lake. Ryuchu's father and mother sat in front of her and Jian Han and told him that since he was now part of their family, they would protect him. His father said that if he did something shameful and thus he dishonored the face of the family, he would not spare him. Jian Han smiled and agreed with everything. Her mother asked why he was so cruel. Ryuchu's mother turned to Han and said that although he can't cultivate anymore, but she can see that she really loves their daughter. She added that they should work hard and make them a grandchild as soon as possible. He happily said that of course he would try his best and work hard until his last breath. Ryuchu looked at him silently and apparently she wasn't really happy. Han chuckled and thought about how things would be a little more complicated with the bride. Ryuchu told her father that she had just gotten the news. Father was afraid that the whole district would gather here today. This time, the youngest prince of the Jufu court and his butler will arrive here. This prince is 16 years old and has the 7th step of Qi gathering, an aristocratic man. He is accompanied by a steward named Chien Han, a great master with great strength. Ryuchu asked her father what they would do. Her father said that His Highness knew that she would not be happy to marry that Zhao and perhaps he felt that it would be too arrogant and it would not be easy for him to openly attack the Yang family. Ryukshu replied that however this time, he would have his Imperial Majesty's brother in his ranks, and if he asked them to do something, they would promise him that they would do anything but within reason. Jian Han asked what they would do if he went too far. Ryukshu said with a not-so-satisfied face that in that case, they would have to put up with all of this. The girl's parents asked if Han had any other options. He said that he didn't have any other options and he had no idea at all, and if he asked them for something within the norm, they would do so and try to accommodate his requests as much as possible. But if his inquiries went out of line, then they would kill him and spare no one. Father slammed the table. He said that it's all nonsense, and if they kill him then he doesn't know what they will do if his troops start threatening their borders. Then their residents will be in a hopeless situation. His father asked him not to interrupt him if he doesn't understand. Jian Han looked at him and said that he shouldn't worry, for now they wouldn't be able to take over the snowy city by marriage. Han added that they would only put pressure on them under the emperor's orders. Han asked his father-in-law if they asked him to hand over their authority over the city to him, would he agree to their authority? His father immediately refused. Han asked what would happen if they threatened the Ryukshu. The girl replied that in that case she would rather commit suicide than let them succeed. Father and Han immediately began to deny it. Jian Han gently took Ryukshu's hand. She was a little embarrassed and thought that maybe he really cared for her that much. Ryukshu's mother told Jian Han that since he offered to kill them, what was his plan then? The guy said that he had a 3-ring strategy. Hanner's father-in-law immediately interrupted him and said that it's easy for him to say it now, but this time, the attendants have one great master. He asked how they should kill him. The girl's mom told him to finish listening to the guy. Hanner started pulling something out of his coat. He held out a book and said that today the father-in-law didn't need to worry about such things and he'd better focus on practicing. He said that with this legendary fighting technique and immortality pills, he would have an amazing effect. Hanner's father-in-law picked up what he gave him and was a bit surprised because he didn't understand what it was. The guy said it was for the rest of the rings and added that he would organize everything. Han and Ryukyu's stood in front of the troops. The troops had a stern look. Jian Han said that it was good enough, since the aura of war emanated from them like that. Ryukshu told Han that there were 3,000 city guards from the snowy city and he could choose anyone he wanted, but he would really only take 30 people. She thought that would be quite small against a master. But the boy confidently replied that 30 men would be quite enough for him. Han said hello to the troops. But there was still silence. Han said that he would need to teach them the war slogan a little later. It would help them strengthen their military spirit. Ryukshu told Jian Han that he needed to pick someone first. She offered to talk about their cultivation skills and combat strength. Han refused and said that he didn't look at their cultivation level. The guy started to tell them very loudly that they should know that he and they were going on a special mission that would be extremely dangerous. He added that it was a matter of life and death and those who wanted to leave could do so right now. All the troops raised their hands and shouted in one voice that they would never retreat. Han said that was very good. He started to tell them that they had some conditions to fulfill and if he felt they had handled them he would take them with him, and Ryukshu thought about what those conditions could be. The melee fighter had knotted pink hair and a rather menacing look. The scout was with some sort of spear and wearing a helmet. And the first-class archer was with an ordinary bow and also wearing a helmet. Han thought to himself, he should be pleased with them. He raised his hand up and addressed the formation and said that they should find a rhythm and if everyone understood, they should step forward. Everyone stood there not moving because no one understood what he wanted. Ryukshu asked what the rhythm was and if it was so necessary and Han said that it was right. Ryukshu wondered how it was that there were so many people in the city guard and no one knew about it. The troops didn't understand why the hell they should be looking for some rhythm to kill the great master. They couldn't understand what kind of games he was playing. They said that rhythm was for women and they were dorks going to the front. A guy came out of the crowd and asked if they needed someone to beat the drums of war. Han said that was already good and asked him to stand up and asked him what his name was. He stood up and said his name was Luo Shang. He thanked him for noticing him. Everyone was very surprised at this choice. After all, this guy was the weakest of them all, but even he was able to guess. Jian Han began to voice his second condition. He thought about the fact that although the first one was like a joke, the war also needed at least one drummer, so next he decided to select the most courageous of them. Han asked which of them knew how to sew and asked such people to step out of the line. Some guy scattered all of them. He looked quite formidable. Han asked if everyone there was okay. He raised his hand and said that he had learned sewing from his mother. No one thought he was that kind of person. Han told him to come over and asked him what his name was too. This guy was shaking a little. He said his name was Zhu Weiliang. Han said he was a mama's boy, but it would do. He thought about the fact that this heavyweight turned out to be a mama's boy. Ryukshu didn't understand why he was doing this and what his plan was. She asked what rings were still left. Han told Weiliang that he would mend the clothes. Han asked the troops who among them could dance and said that acrobatics was also welcome. He also asked if there were any other blacksmiths or perhaps chess players, because they would be good for them too. He kept asking about who could slaughter cattle or something like that. Everyone started to respond and get out of line. Generally that's how 30 people gathered. Ryukshu once again asked a question about whether Han was really going to use only 30 people to fight the Grand Master. Han looked at her and said that of course yes. He was thinking about if that wasn't the case. The guy started to tell her that the strength of these men was great, certainly great, but they just needed to start gathering chi, for otherwise they would not be able to break through the Great Master's defenses. Ryukshu asked that would they be able to kill the Great Master and added that the lives of the soldiers were not pawns to play with at all. Han fixed the girl's hair and told her that she looked beautiful even when she was angry. He also told her that she could have confidence in them, and even though they were weak now, there were almost 5 hours left until the evening, and that was more than enough time to make them much stronger. The girl wanted to object, but it seemed she couldn't. Jian Han told all the chosen ones to follow him. He mumbled about the matter of killing the Grand Master. By the evening, everyone would know everything. Those troops who had not been chosen were discussing what their son-in-law had thought when he had chosen the people for such an important task. They wondered if Han leading their team would lead to the collapse of their snowy city. They felt most sorry for their commander Yen marrying a scum like him. Yen Ryukshu shouted and said enough gossip. She raised her hand and asked how they even dare to gossip about her husband. The girl told them to head to training, and today they would train double to learn today's lesson. No one expected her to defend him. The girl was upset. Someone said 5 o'clock. It was too late. On horseback, someone came riding in. It was the little prince, along with Chien Han. The little prince turned to Chien Han and asked if his brother had high hopes for this small ruined city. Han replied that yes, it was indeed true, and besides, the beauty of Yang Ryukshu was really mesmerizing. The prince was strangling some girl and said that no matter how beautiful she was an ungrateful brat. The little prince said that who would have thought that they would dare to attack Jian before he got married. It would damage the reputation of their entire residence, and they wouldn't let them get away with it. Chien Han was in complete agreement. The prince said that because of this whore, his older brother met his demise. However, he wouldn't mind having some fun with her. The prince turned to his mercenary Chien and told him to listen to his errand. The man bowed and said he was listening carefully. He wanted them to pay for what they had done. Father along with Ryukshu stood next to the little prince and his assistant. Father said they were honored by the little prince's visit to their city. The little prince looked at young Ryukshu. He licked his lips and said that it was no wonder his brother wanted to marry a girl with such a face and figure. The prince turned to her and said that he had heard that she had gotten married. She thought about the fact that she had heard a long time ago that the little prince was a pervert, but she didn't think she was so frivolous that she would molest her from the first words. Ryukshu said, informing the little prince that she was indeed married. The little prince laughed and clapped his hands and said it was a shame, but today she would be his since it was such a good day. There was already some festering atmosphere, and it looked like they would really have to follow Jian Han's plan. Ryukshu's father laughed and said that the little prince must have been joking. He asked them to follow him to the mansion. After all, they should rest, and the young family had prepared a banquet to celebrate their arrival. The prince agreed and said that he just had one conversation to have. The prince and his mercenary walked into the dining room. They sat down at a table full of food. The father asked his wife to calm down. The little prince only looked at the girl's lush breasts. The little prince turned to Master Yang and said that he was very lucky to have such a charming daughter and wife. He added that the fact that he had such a wonderful daughter must be a blessing bestowed on him by his past life, and the father thanked him. He thought about the fact that this boy is not only lusting after his daughter Ryukshu but also looking at his wife. Now he agreed with Chien Han and that he should die. The prince said he had heard that their son-in-law was a talented genius and asked why he wasn't here yet then. His father replied that he must be joking. After all, he had told him not to show up so he wouldn't bother them. The prince replied that anyhow he should invite his son-in-law so he wouldn't think he was too arrogant. His father replied that he would immediately order him to be called to the table. More and more, Ryukshu's father agreed with Jian Han. Han said that the prince would want to see him in person and so would allow him to sit at the table with them. Jian Han came and said that from the son-in-law had already arrived. The red-eyed troops were ready. Han walked into the room where they were dining. Jian Han bowed and said that the commoner was happy to welcome the prince. The little prince said that it was no wonder that such a white-skinned handsome man could win the heart of a lady. Han smiled and thanked him. Ryukshu thought about how his acting skills were too much. The prince was very hypocritical. He was thinking about what a scumbag Han was and he didn't understand how Ryukshu could fall in love with a scumbag like him. The little prince said that now that everyone was here, it was time for them to get down to business. He started to say that he had originally come here to propose to young Ryukshu instead of his brother, but since she was already married he couldn't do that. The prince said that his father has conditions that they are at liberty to refuse. His father asked what those conditions were. The little prince said let their city return to the prefectures of his Tianfen county and he must also hand over all their military might to the city guards. Do they have any objections? Ryukshu's father turned to the little prince and asked if he could give him some time to think. The boy said yes, but not much. He thanked him for his understanding. The prince wanted something else. He said that while Lord Yang was considering the terms, he required his daughter and wife to serve him. The prince said that he enjoyed drinking wine with beauties like these two. Master Yan was very angry. He thought about the fact that the prince seemed to think that since their city was in a bad position, he wouldn't dare to say anything to them. Jian Han bowed, turned to the prince and said that if he needed someone to have a drink with, he could have the other two beauties and he wouldn't need to bother his mother-in-law and his wife. The little prince is already getting extremely naked. He said he would sleep with his mother-in-law and his wife tonight. Ryukshu and her mother got very angry. Han asked if that meant that they wouldn't spare their mansion tonight. The little prince laughed and said that it all depended on how pleased he was. And even though Han's wife and mother-in-law were beautiful enough for him, the prince wanted them both to kneel down in front of him and start playing drums for him and then maybe he would spare their little town. Lord Yang was angry enough. Jian Han asked the prince if he was afraid that they might revolt against them and whoever they are now they are in their territory. The prince laughed and asked how dare this idiot threaten him at all. He added that hundreds of thousands of people of this town will be buried with them and the great master will take care of it. Jian Han said that since they were saying that, they wouldn't start a riot. Han clapped his hands and said then just as a small gift should accept it. Han had his troops behind him. The prince looked at them in surprise. They all had some kind of bloody bags in their hands. The prince wasn't so calm anymore. He thought about the fact that all of his soldiers were dead. He turned to Yang Qingcheng and asked how he even dared to rebel against him. Jian Han and Yang Qingcheng said with one voice that he should die today. The prince told Yang Qingcheng that he was a corpse and told Chien Han to bring him his corpse. He obeyed him. Henu ran at them. Tiangang had already gotten into a stance. They clashed. The fight started. They took turns hitting each other. They swung and their fists closed. Tiangan found himself in the wall. He coughed. Han asked if he had made it to a first-level master. The prince was surprised, for it seems Tiangan had broken through to a first-rank master and the prince was now in a bit of a precarious position. Han smilingly said that it was really unexpected and now the master behind them was not an advantage. Jian Han asked about kneeling down and hitting his head on the floor 3 times so he wouldn't kill him. The little prince was furious. He asked if Han wanted to die. Chien Han told the prince that he could be sure of him and even know it. Yang Han had burst through his body, still not enough life force, and since he was only wounded, Han was sure he would kill him within 10 moves. The prince said he would cut off this son-in-law's arms and legs and sew up his mouth. He wanted him to see with his own eyes what happens to those who dare to insult him. Jian Han told the noble elder to take his time, for the junior had specially prepared some extra gifts for him, and since he had already received the first gift, and if he didn't believe him, let him look at his palm. All his hand was in cut vessels, and since Hung sat down at the table he had neither eaten nor drunk anything, for he was afraid of being poisoned. He got angry and asked him when he had time to do that. Han asked if he thought the air in the city was too sweet. After all, he had specially prepared it for him. The guy said he wouldn't have been poisoned if he hadn't used his life force, and it was the poisonous vapors entering his body along with his life force. Han said he didn't have to worry. The poison wouldn't kill him completely. It would only weaken him and leave him with 50% of his strength. Hong said Han was smart. The poison trick was very good. He had always done things with caution, but he certainly didn't expect to be caught by some kid. Hong said if he only had 50% of his strength left, shouldn't Han's father-in-law have the same amount of strength left? Han clapped and said that his father-in-law wasn't his next opponent anyway, and he hoped he would accept his next gift. Some armored troops came in. Hong said that it comes out Han is willing to sacrifice the lives of these people to deal with him. The prince laughed and said that this kid is a complete idiot and these turtles can't survive a battle against a great master. His father wondered why if there were 3,000 men in the army he chose so few, and Ryukshu's mother couldn't understand why he brought so few men either. Han said that if they thought they could defeat him, let them try to do so. Han said that since he was so insistent, he would fulfill it for him.